So, one piece of advice you would give to someone who's stuck on either being spiritual, being scientific, how can they make the two come together? What do you think?
Um,
How do you mix the disciplines?
well, I guess one of the first things it's kind of like what we talk about. I think studying things like astrotheology is a good start, right? Because
Okay.
you have astronomy and you have theology, right? And these are kind of science and religion, and so you have both of them, and so they're combining themselves into one study, and then realizing that this was actually the first philosophy and the first science that humans ever really came up with. Um, and if you start to understand that, because that lays down the foundation of where myth and psychology, right, and philosophy and all of
Right.
these things started to come out of. So astrotheology, I think, is the the parent development of all other branches of the human experience in terms of its mental kind of self-reflective nature. It had to start there. It started with looking at
Right.
the stars and noticing
Well, it was
patterns.
verifiable events that happened
Yeah,
every
it was
day, and
correct.
they were predictable. And I think
Correct.
people didn't have much predictability back then in
Yeah.
nature. You could walk safely through the woods one day, and then the next day walk the same path and get eaten by bears. So to have some sort of predictability, I think that's why it gained such importance. Was when they began to grow crops and become agricultural. The spiritual part of it, I think, like what you said, is I think it's kind of become separated from the science now.
Yeah,
I think,
science has been on like a 4-decade run of
yeah,
reductionist,
yeah, right,
materialistic, and separative type of. You have, and this happens in a lot of fields. In fact, this happens in the medical field, where before your general doctor knew a lot about the body. Nowadays, people are all specialists. So
right,
if you always have to go. You have a hand surgeon or a shoulder surgeon or a knee surgeon. You used to just have a surgeon. And so what's happened with science is it's branched out, and then it's isolated those branches, and within those branches, people aren't actually becoming over knowledgeable about the other sides of it, which is all needed. So what's happening now is that you don't have in this particular field that we're talking about, you just don't have this kind of like, how does this all bring together? The beginning physicists that we grew up with, these guys that created quantum mechanics and quantum theory, these guys were philosophical and theists to a large degree. They didn't separate the religious side of things, or I'd say spiritual side of things, to this. You have quotes from Ernst Schrödinger, a Nobel Prize-winning Austrian physicist who developed a number of fundamental results in the field of quantum theory. You have the
Ooh, that
Schrödinger
sounded
equation. He
cool.
was the author of all of these books on electrodynamics and general
Hmm.
relativity and cosmology. And so this guy,
So where did they get apart? Where did the
this guy,
split happen? Was it
this guy
back in
says
the
that
1800s?
Schrodinger's quote is, "The total number of minds in the universe is one. In fact, consciousness is a singularity phasing between all beings."
Right.
Back in the day of Einstein and Tesla and Max Planck and all these guys that were founding this stuff, to them this was not uh, out there theories. Today these same statements would make you, oh, you're a quack, and these guys like these. And so there's been kind of a politicized kind of indoctrinated type of blend of science that's kind of like, oh, and scientism has now become kind of religion to itself,
Yeah.
right? Where,
Yeah.
but the facts are that a
Now, is
large
it in the colleges? Is it starting in the colleges, you think? Is that where it's becoming an issue, or are they, starting early? Well, from what I see, I think the colleges are probably finishing off the product of the separation of the two throughout the education system.
Yeah, I believe that follow the money is probably
Sure.
a good way to look at it, because the stuff is all probably leads to some type of, how do we generate more control and or money from the science. And so
Sure.
science has become more of a tool than it has an exploratory method of understanding the universe. Science started as a method of trying to question the universe. Science, in its base, was always philosophical. It was never
Right.
just, in the church started to allow it. The Catholic Church was the first in the more recent modern Western era to say, okay, let's start studying nature, because there was this belief that by studying nature, you're studying God. And so that's kind of how they let that in. And they allowed things like, it took time, and there was, kind of a tidal wave back and forth of what they allowed, but they're the ones that kind of started the natural sciences. And even today, the Vatican owns most of the telescopes. Yeah, the Vatican has
awesome,
more.
They're huge.
They're huge contributors to science. I mean,
the telescope.
So I think the marriage of science and religion is kind of where things need to go. This is why I believe people need to expand their idea of God. They need to understand religion is tied in mythology and symbolism and astrotheology, and everything needs to be understood deeply and a little bit more openly, because of course there's evil people. Religion is not the responsibility for lots of murders. Human greed and dominance and control is the responsibility of mass murders. It has nothing to do with what people believe, because state atheism killed 100 million people, and religious people killed 100 million people, and a large percentage of the people that religious people killed were also the same religious people. As Christians persecuted more Christians, and Jews and Christians persecuted each other, and religious people constantly just kill each other, mostly over power and dominance and land, not because you believed in this guy and I believed in that guy. It really wasn't what happened. And we can see even in the Viking era, when you had these Anglo-Saxons that had their version of Christianity, that actually before that you had this Celtic version that started to blend into Christianity, and those myths kind of, and then the Vikings came over and they had theirs, and none of that was over religious battles. That was all like Vikings wanted to settle, they wanted to farm, they wanted to take over resources.
They were roughly pagan still. They were kind of they were still in the pagan era. They were trying to hybridize the two. The new monotheism and the pagan ideals that they had previously, and that's what the Vikings did. Was they reduced it all down to a very mechanical sort of means, and they simplified it. And when it started changing over, and they became Christians, it was like they were pretty much already there. I mean, they kind of, like you said, they wanted to have family and farms, and they weren't interested in doing evil deeds. Sure, they would conquest or conquer, because that's back then that's what Vikings did. They didn't do it because, there's an island full of Catholics, let's go kill them all. It wasn't for that reason. It was because our family's been stuck, in a terrible, snowy season, and there's been no food, and we're going to ask you guys for food once, and if you don't give it to us, then we're just going to kill you all and take it. So, that's how it went back then. Yeah.
Same shit. Indians did it here, and Native Americans did it here. There's been
good answer, though. You had a good answer. I like that.
That hasn't persecuted and conquered the other, and religion. And religion had really a lot less to do with it than people realize. Sure. So again, I think that what we need to do is we need to expand our understanding of what these, what these experiences that people went through in a collective meant on a deeper level. Astrotheology is a place to start, because that's where all of this began in our ancient, past. And I'm talking 20, 30,000, 40,000 years ago. This is when this stuff was kind of being developed, and this. It takes you in every field possible: philosophy, mathematics, geometry, science, geology. It will take you in everything, psychology, how this stuff,
mathematics too, because
it leads to every
a lot of people is mathematics. When, people start to bring math in with astrotheology, it's all, it's obvious recordable facts and, and history, and there's just no mistaking it. So you don't need formulas or equations to explain it. You don't
everything,
have to look for any of the math, because it's all right in front of your eyes. Yeah.
Right. You have the concept of time. Where'd that come from? Well, the stars, right?
Yeah.
And then what does time do? Well, it measures, movement, I guess, right?
Recording of events. Yep. Is what
right.
It is.
And so it's kind of, if you really think of it, this is where everything began. And what's funny about it is that we've kind of forgotten about astrotheology. We've forgotten about the source of where all these things kind of it is the Big Bang, right?
Yeah.
It's where everything went boom. It's basically the brain's Big Bang, where it was like, oh my God, we're in this greater. Look at me as a part to the universe, and look at these gods, right? These stars and
Sure.
these moons and these planetary
Coming
gods,
back every night,
and they fight, and
for
they
thousands of years.
and when they fight, they destroy half the earth. And
Well, plus they could see meteorites back then, and they could see celestial objects moving through space, and it would have looked like a war. When there was no ambient light, if you were sitting out there at night by the river and you looked up, I mean, you saw everything that moved within millions of miles. I mean, it was just pure and clean as it was right there. So the things they saw in the sky were like that. They were just
right.
They were godly, and they were almost like a show you would just count on. And then of course, then you ended up with all your comet names and Typhon and everything that happened, and it's built into everybody's genetic markers. I mean, they can't deny it. They were there being a part of it.
And it goes back to the idea of the universe as being intelligent, and they knew the universe was intelligent because it was a breathing, changing, emotional thing. It destroyed, it created, it provided, it
organizes and destroys itself at the same time.
And they also, people have lost the ability to understand the animals around them. Like, they live in these concrete boxes and these. Yeah. And they don't understand what nature's doing right next door to them. Like, and how does all this nature stuff work? And when you go out on a ranch and you understand that, you can see that animals are brutal. I mean, this is a survival. Everything they all know each other's patterns. They all can hear each other. They all feel each other. They all eat off each other, and they're in a giant rhythm with each other. And we were embedded in that for dozens of millennia, and so we've lost a lot of that. And I believe that even things like art and poetry would come from astrotheology, right? Because
absolutely,
we're looking at something beautiful as like the auroras or celestial objects and blood moons and things like that happen, and it was very inspiring. So me myself included, we all need to really dig into these patterns.
I'm going to show you something here. I think everybody who's listening to this should definitely, I'm going to go ahead and screen share this. This book is amazing. This has so much cool stuff in it that is basically the 1800s and onward idea of how religion and science came together and how they worked together and how people went for a certain goal and the understanding of everything. So, let's see. So can you see my screen?
Yeah. All
right. This book's called Science of the Sacraments by Charles Ledbetter. Gosh, I can't remember when it was written. 1919. 1919.
1919, yeah.
Dude, it explains...
Yeah, this guy was...
it's amazing.
Theosophical society, right?
This explains everything about why churches are built the way they are, why religion does the rituals that it does, and it connects them with science, and it connects them with. I mean, it's really inspiring to read. So I figured I'd share this. If anybody wants to get it, it's Kindle hardcover or paperback. They're all pretty affordable. But that's probably one of the best books I've ever read that would bring us to think about this question that we're talking about right now. So
very cool.
That would be my pick. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop share. All right, guys, there we go.
That's cool. Yeah, and that particular era was awesome. That's the Manly P. Hall. Tesla. Yes, we had all these guys. That Walter Russell, right? Blavatsky. Yep. This era again, it opened. A portal seemed to open somewhere and allowed a flush of information to come in. I think we kind of we upgraded our system.
What it was, I think, was a lot of it was we sort of reached a certain comfort level with the industrialization. People had more time to think. People had more time to slow down and smell the roses. They weren't like in the 1800s. You got up at the crack of dawn. You worked until it got dark.
Worked.
Yeah, and you had to do so much, and you're always behind. But once apartment buildings and everything became industrialized, there was electricity everywhere. You could stay up at night and read real easily, and have your meals, and you didn't have to go to bed at 6 o'clock because it got dark. I mean, I think people just ended up with a lot more time. And what happened was, there, just like the Industrial Revolution, when certain materials and technology came around in the late 1700s, and people started building steam engines and stuff. I think it's the same way with philosophy and theosophy and all that. People have more time to think, and people were just able to sit down and go, "Oh, holy shit, man! I never thought of that. I never stopped to think about that." And I think that's why you see that explosion you're talking about there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's happening right now as well. I mean, we're noticing that today, and even though I think there's a lot of there's a lot of crap, and back then, they still had to go to the libraries and read the ancient scripts, and it was harder. Now there's just an inundation of information that's hard to sift through. But there's a lot of basically every single thing that the human mind has put on paper is now available within a click and on your
we're
phone.
ready, man. The last 20 years has been an explosion again. The internet, I mean, the mass connectivity.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
in the world, so that we're right on the apex of it right now. We're cresting that wave. It's pretty awesome.
I mean, that's our goal here, is to basically surf the wave, right? And say, hey, what's going on in the world? Hey, check this out. Hey, check this out. We're trying to basically, filter in and press pause and, analyze it as it goes by, so that we can kind of break it down and try to unpack it and figure out.
You're not going to
break it down.
I don't have to spin around on my back or anything, or break dance or anything.
No MC Hammer moves. Yeah.
I got baggy pants. I can do that.
Well, I mean, if you say you can, then I'm probably going to challenge you to do it. Yeah.
I'll do it.
But
I don't know if I'll recover from it and never do it again. Yeah. But they say you only live once. Break dance one time, and that's it. That's all I needed was once.